This meeting of the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting. This meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will include the instant messaging. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? I ask that the people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. No? I will now explain how this meeting will be conducted. The role of chairman will continue, but the Democratic Services Officer will assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols. The Democratic Services Officer will produce the minutes and provide procedural advice as required. I will provide further explanations as we proceed through the agenda, but members are reminded that instant messaging will be visible to those viewing the meeting and must only be used for raising technical issues, indicating a wish to speak, raising a point of order, or seconding a motion. I now ask the Democratic Services Officer to take the attendance register by reading out the list of committee members in alphabetical order. Members should confirm their attendance by answering present.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. I'll quickly do the register. Councillor Atkinson.
Present.
We have received apologies from Councillor Brindle. Councillor Cox.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Cumming.
Present.
Councillor Daley. Okay, we'll come back. Councillor Fissenden.
Present.
Councillor Harvey.
Present.
Councillor Perry.
Present.
Councillor Round. We have Councillor Round here.
See him. He's there.
We can see him. Councillor Round. Well, I can see him in the list there. Councillor Cooling.
Yes.
And Councillor Titchener.
He is trying to get in. It's Peter Cooling. He's trying to get in. So
Okay.
he should be attending.
Thank you. That's the register completed. Thank you.
Thank you. I now ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out a list of officers present and which items they are presenting as appropriate.
Thank you, Chairman. This evening we have Rich Clark, Head of Audit Partnership for item 13, Ellie Dunnett, Head of Finance for items 15 and 16, Mark Green, Director of Finance and Business Improvement for item 17, John Owen, Finance Manager, item 14, Orla Sweeney, Equalities and Corporate Policy Officer for item 12, Jennifer Warrilow, Audit Manager for item 13, and me, Debbie Snook, the Democratic Services Officer. We also have Tina James of Grant Thornton, the External Auditor, and do we have Paul Dossett as well? Yes, we do. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to item 1, apologies for absence. I now ask Democratic Services Officer to read out a list of apologies received.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Brindle.
Moving on then to agenda item 2, substitute members. I now ask the Democratic Services Officer if there are any substitute members. The Democratic Services Officer will read out each person from the list and the substitute member should answer present.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand that Councillor Garton is substituting for Councillor Brindle.
That is correct. Good evening, and I'm present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, urgent items. I have agreed to take the updated report of the Director of Finance and Business Improvement relating to the unavoidable breach of the current counterparty limits as an urgent item, as the situation arose after the agenda for the meeting was published. It is relevant to the committee's discussions regarding the Treasury Management Strategy at agenda item 14, and in order to keep members informed, this has been published. I will give 5 minutes for this to be read ahead of the agenda item later in the meeting. Moving on to agenda item 4, visiting members. I now ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out a list of visiting members.
Thank you, Chairman. I was advised that Councillor Harper may be attending as an observer, but I can't see him in the list at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members or officers this evening? No. Agenda item 6, disclosures of lobbying. Are there any disclosures of lobbying this evening? No. Agenda item 7, to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of possible disclosure of exempt information. I move that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda
Agreed.
Agenda item 8, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of November 2020. I'll take it page by page. So these start on page 1 of your agenda pack. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9.
Hello there.
Hello, is that Peter Titchener?
Hello, it's Dan Daley. I'm in by phone. The other thing doesn't work. It doesn't seem to want to know at all. I'm sorry, but I shall be on the phone.
Hello, Dan. Have you got any disclosures of lobbying or any other disclosures to make?
No, not at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we were on page 10 of the minutes from the previous meeting. As there have been no questions raised, I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of November be approved as a correct record. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thank you.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. The minutes will be signed as correct at a later date. Agenda item 9, questions and answers from members of the public. There are no questions this evening. Item 10, questions from members. There are no questions this evening. Agenda item 11, the committee work programme. This is on page 11 of the agenda reports pack. And I understand that the head of audit partnerships wishes to put forward an item for inclusion in the work programme.
Thank you, Chair. It wasn't so much as an item to put forward in the work programme, really, but an update to members on a previous item. We've been keeping members up to date over the past couple of years on the Redmond review into an investigation into the effectiveness of the local authority audit regime. When we presented to members when we last met, we were still awaiting the government response, which has now been received. And so I was going to very briefly bring members up to date with that government response, which was 3 main points, really. The 3 recommendations from among the 23 that we highlighted as having the most impact. Firstly, the recommendation to move the accounts deadline back from the end of July to the end of September. The government has accepted that at least for the next 2 years, and so the accounts deadline for 2021 and 21-22 will be the end of September rather than the end of July. Secondly, the recommendation that local authorities should accompany their accounts with a separate statement that aims to be more transparent and easier to read for members of the public to help them understand the council's financial situation. The government's response indicated that they were in favour of that, and they'd work with SIPFA or ask SIPFA to try and come up with a format for that document. However, the third and most significant recommendation of Redmond, which was the establishment of a separate brand new overarching regulatory body to assign and oversee the quality of audit work, the government is not persuaded on that and will respond in more detail next spring, but it's certainly not something that's going to go ahead right now. So that's where we are with the Redmond review currently, Chair. So given members' long-standing interest in this issue, I thought it was worth an update at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, does anyone wish to respond to that at all or make any comments? I know this was something that we widely discussed.
Chair, as I was going to mention the Redmond review, but Mr. Clark has clarified the current situation. Also, I'm thinking what we should also add to the work programme, if you refer to page 2 of the minutes of the last meeting, it talks about waste contract management. So the report is being drafted apparently, so I think that should go onto the work programme so we know what the position is. Thank you.
If I might come in there, Chair.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
So it's Rich Clark, Head of Audit. Yes, Councillor Atkinson, that's one of our routine pieces of audit work that's currently being finalised. depending on the results of that audit, which I don't have because it's being finalised at the moment, that will be reported to members as standard no later than with our annual report in June, July time. So it will be a part of the work programme come July as part of our annual reporting. And if the findings are in any way concerning, it can go on as a separate item. But as it stands, it's already essentially on the work programme for July.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Members, are there any other questions on the work programme or the Redmond review? No?
No questions.
In which case then we'll move on to agenda item 12, which starts on page 12 of the agenda reports back. And I call upon Orla Sweeney, Equality and Corporate Policy Officer, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, everybody. This report provides an overview of how the Council has responded to complaints for 2019-20. There were 720 Stage 1 complaints, an increase of 26.8% from 2018-19. 120 of the 720 Stage 1 complaints received were escalated to Stage 2. This rate has reduced from the previous year from 19.2 to 15.3%. Of the 110 Stage 2 complaints, 12 were upheld. The report also describes a new assessment as part of the complaints process. This is undertaken as a means of documenting the inquiries that are made prior to a complaint being taken forward for a Stage 2 investigation, in line with the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's guidance. It helps to transparently identify whether a Stage 2 investigation can add anything of value to the original Stage 1 investigation and response. This helps prevent complaints being investigated at Stage 2 that cannot provide any further remedy or outcome to the complaint, for example, cancelling a parking ticket. The process also encourages positive engagement with the complainant and better manages expectation in terms of outcome. Moving on to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's report. The LGSCO received 49, or rather reviewed 49 complaints, an increase of 6 from the previous year. 7 complaints were upheld, and all recommendations made by the LGSCO have been implemented by the Council. There were no investigations or reports in 2019-20. Lastly, the Council received 47 compliments for the year. Sorry, that's the good news bit. And finally, the policy and information team's processes do help it identify areas where improvements can be made. As a team, we will be reviewing a number of areas in order to impact positively on performance. Areas of focus will include the services with complaints upheld at Stage 2, of which there were 12, and those with an increased number of complaints taken to the LGSCO. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Members, are there any questions or comments on this particular report?
I'd like to compliment the officer on the report, Chairman. I think it's a very fine report. Thank you.
May I?
Councillor Perry, you were first in. Do you want to go with yours first?
Yeah, just a quick question, really. It's a very comprehensive report, so I appreciate that. It's just at the very end, on the final page 33, you've got at the top complaints upheld, and 64% of complaints were upheld. But when it's compared with the average in similar authorities, the average is only 45%. Could you explain the difference? Thank you.
Sorry, I'll need to go to the agenda. I've only got one screen. So on page 33 of your agenda papers.
Yeah, sorry if I've given you the wrong page number.
Does it say? Could you give me the number that it says at the bottom? Is it in one of the
33.
appendices?
Yeah, 33.
Oh, okay, right. So I need to go to one of the appendices.
Yes. I was just curious. That's all. When I saw it.
No, it's actually on our papers. I don't think it's the appendix.
This is actually in a paper. Yeah,
Oh, no,
I think you're. Is it appendix?
At the top of the page.
Right, so it's in the
page.
report from the local government.
Yeah.
Social care ombudsman. Oh yes, and that's actually one of the points that I've got down that I want to review. So that's looking at all cases that it's reviewed across all local authorities, and yes, our performance is lower. They've upheld more complaints. So of those 7 that they investigated this year, I intend to drill down into the detail of those complaints. I know the service areas that they are, and it will be looking at what's happening before the complaint's made, why they've had, so really drilling down into the detail of the complaint. And that is actually, I picked up on that in the report as one of the areas I'd like to impact positively. So thank you.
No, that's fine. Okay, thank you very much, Olaf. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, I've got Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, again, I think it's a very good report. On page 13, though, under paragraph 1.3, it talks about the complaints procedure has 3 stages. It's got stage 1, stage 2, no stage 3, and then when you go into the council website via the hyperlink, again it only talks about 2 stages in there. So what is the 3rd stage?
So the third stage is the local government ombudsman. I'm not going to say it all, it's such a mouthful now, isn't it? So the LGO, so the 3rd stage in all complaints processes. So if you go onto their website or if you look at our policy, which I'm happy to circulate to the committee, it details that as the standard. So within an organisation, you've got stage 1 and stage 2, and then the third stage for the complainant is to go to the ombudsman. So that's very much recognised across the board, but I'll look to make that clearer in the report next time for you.
Yeah, because I mean the report itself indicates 3 stages.
Yes,
and it shows 2.
Yes, very much. It's I suppose without having the policy, and perhaps I can understand where the ambiguity is. So I will make a change in the report next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry, did I cut you off just now? Did you want to come back on that point?
No, I'm fine. I'm okay, thanks, Madam Chairman. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garson, you're up next.
Thank you. Yeah, particularly the Appendix 1, I'm missing sort of like a comparison to previous years. Maybe if you do the same report next year, we could have sort of like a comparison, just that we see whether things are going up or going down overall. What you raised quite rightly in your report, and which is pretty much outstanding in the appendix, is obviously the 41% complaints with regards to waste. Could we, as a committee, forward that finding to the CHI committee, that they may be able to address whether there's anything sort of structural in those figures for them to take action on?
I can confirm that the performance is being reported to CHI for that area, and that's an area that's been picked up on, quite rightly so. And obviously, as detailed in my report, the complaints team have got a very strong relationship with that service area in order to have a real understanding of what's going on, and most importantly, what action's been taken on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis, so that we can get that information down to the customer services team, that our officers and our team are aware of it, so that we're managing and disseminating that information to our customers. So yes, it will be going to CHI under the performance report.
Yeah, my first question, could we have a year-by-year comparison particularly for this whole appendix that we're giving?
Okay. So
this year's figures with last year's figures. I mean, it's a bit late now, but obviously, if you bring a similar report again to this committee next time, that you may take that into consideration, please.
Yeah, it's an annual report, so this has been pretty much the standard format year on year. But I'm quite keen to look at it again, to look at the way in which we produce information graphically, and I'll take that comment away when we look at it next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rand, I can see you're typing. Did you want to come in on this particular point?
No, thank you very much, Chair. I'm typing because I'm in and out, and I just wanted to make sure my attendance was recorded.
Noted. Were you here when we did disclosures of lobbying and any other disclosures?
Therefore, I haven't mentioned my attendance, and I have not been lobbied.
Brilliant. Thank you. Miss Nook, have we got that recorded?
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the list, I've got Councillor Cooling.
Thank you very much. So a very thorough report. Well done. But I think following on from what Councillor Atkinson said, in para 1.3, which does refer to 3 stages, then list 2, you've mentioned there is a formal 3rd stage at the moment, but I would have thought this would be an even clearer report if in fact the Constitution were slightly amended to envisage 4 stages, recognising that this unstaged assessment is in fact a stage you go through, and it reduces the numbers going through to stage 2. So I recommend that you consider 4-stage definition with the first 3 stages as listed in 1.3, para 1.3, and the 4th stage put in there, which is the local government, whatever it is. With that 4th stage, then making clear what happens if Maidstone, if we're found wanting. And I think we ought to note, though we might be wearing sackcloth, I think that's down there, we may be wearing sackcloth on the number of complaints in the last financial year. In fact, it's at the same level as 2017-18. So I don't think we should flay ourselves on that. And I think you just mentioned graphical presentation. I thoroughly recommend that to you. A graphical presentation across the years and building up through the stages. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4 as I would have it. And if you want an example of that, I will do an example of that. But a good report, but I think it could be more digestible. Thank you.
Can I just come back on those points, Chairman?
Certainly.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. We have the resources within the team to make these improvements to the report, something I really want to do, but it's just been a difficult year. So that will be happening. I need to give you some clarification on the 3 stages. So at each stage in the complaints process, a number of things happen. There, at stage 1, there's an investigation and response. At stage 1, you get stage 1 complaints come in that sometimes are filtered because actually they're service requests, and those requests for a complaint can actually be dealt with much quicker and to the customer's satisfaction as a service request. So that filtering process happens naturally. The LGO guidance is that there's 3 stages to the complaints process. If we were to create another stage, we would be confusing the guidance that they give and the best practice across the country. The assessment stage isn't an extra stage. It's something that we've always done. It's the inquiry stage that the LGO referred to. So when somebody comes to them, they have an inquiry stage. It's not a formal stage in the complaints process, but all we wanted to do is ensure it's documented and that we're being transparent. I think the mistake we've made is that we've overemphasised this in this report. It doesn't really change a great deal, but it is a way of us doing something positive to positively impact on the process and drive performance and improvement forward. So I think, thank you so much for your comments, and I noticed that many of you have come back to this point, and I hope I've made it clear, and I will circulate the complaints policy separately to you and make the changes next year. But really this is the standard. It's my mistake, and I think there's too much emphasis on the report on that assessment stage. It's just a way of being transparent to you as a committee.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Collins, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, please. This assessment non-stage is a new innovation, I think, from November of last year. Therefore, if it does it or does it not? Is it in accordance with good practice? And if it is, obviously it should have been done in previous years, but it does distort comparisons across the year in terms of looking across the stages. So whatever the good practice says, I would have thought for clarity in this report, this assessment needs to be recognised as certainly a stage in your internal process, with graphical presentation showing the progressions of the different classifications of complaints across the years. But I'm happy to come back to that by email as necessary.
Yeah, we can do. I completely understand what you're saying. It's just that it is part of our internal process. It's an interchangeable term. They were inquiries. We're now documenting the way we deal with those inquiries, as the LGO does. It's not a formal part of the process. You're right. It's part of our internal processes that all administrative teams have. I don't think there's a great deal of impact on the figures, because we would have been doing this naturally and now we're documenting it. But I note the comparison isn't being able to be made, and it can't satisfy the committee that it's a like-for-like comparison with last year, when we're saying that there's an assessment stage, a formal assessment that we're making, even though really it is something that we've done and we haven't documented it. So as of next year, when we're doing a comparison with the year before, we'll have recorded the information last year and this year in the same way, so we'll be able to do a like-for-like comparison that we can have trust in those figures and the way that they were recorded.
Thank you for that. Councillor Collins, do you want to come back on that at all? Councillor Collins, you're on mute.
I was trying to be well behaved. I don't think I'll bore members any further on this. I will return to email at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, you're next on the list.
Thank you very much. A lot has been said. However, I wanted to make 2 points. One was going to be pointing to the waste service area. But if we take a step back first, sometimes when you, and this isn't about Maidstone Borough Council, this is just general contacting companies who do a similar thing when people contact them. What I wanted to understand is, are all contacts, in a sense, a complaint, or is someone asked, are you complaining about this service? Because I've had dealings with Barclays once, just where I was saying, could I make X change, so a date change to a payment, and they said, oh, well, we don't really think, would you like to make a complaint? And I said, well, no, I just want to do X. So my question is, if we look at some of the higher figures on the table in Appendix 1 on page 25 and 26, when you look at Maidstone Culture and Leisure, that's an external service. Development management isn't. Council tax, that's people paying something, they're probably begrudging paying it anyway. I'm wondering, do we evaluate whether it's a complaint and someone needs to be able to respond and take responsibility for an action or a failure of something, or is it just a question that's been raised and it's being treated as a complaint? Ola.
So our complaints come in predominantly by telephone or via an online form. So the customer would have a choice on whether it was an online inquiry or they wanted to make a complaint. So at that point, they're making the choice. But we do continuous training with customer services, and obviously they're very experienced members of staff. So they would try to resolve any query or expression of dissatisfaction by trying to get what the customer wants done. So the first way of doing that would be to deal with it as a service request, but obviously things do escalate, and at that point something might become a complaint. So obviously I'm not on the front line, but we do have lots and lots of conversation and talking about that, or talking about issues that are raised. But we certainly don't push people down a complaints route just because we don't want to deal with something.
I would be interested to know, because of that 295 complaints about waste service, if that was on something's been missed, or why wasn't this collected the first time, it was sitting beside X, is that a complaint? Because if it is, I'm afraid I'm responsible for about 7 or 8 of those. So I see Peter laughing there. I just would like to clarify if this raise, the rise in these figures, as stated by the Ombudsman, because the percentage is higher. I'm not trying to look at this as a KPI, but if it is, as we will look at it next year, and as Councillor Garton has said, we then have something to compare with, I really would like to know how we've arrived at it being a complaint. Okay, so just a bit of clarification when we next look at this, or indeed as we go forward, keep on recording these. So I'll bring it up with you outside the meeting, but thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Members, are there any more questions on this? No, in which case then we turn to page 12 of the agenda reports pack. There is one recommendation, and that is that this report be noted. Have I got a proposer and a seconder, please?
Can we just take it that it's noted from the chair, if it's noting? Or is it an actual? I'm happy to propose.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Seconded, Martin.
Perfect. Thank you. In that case, then, members, are you happy to agree this be noted?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Turning then to agenda item 13, which is on page 34. This is the interim audit report 2020-2021, and I call upon Rich Clark, Head of Audit Partnership, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the report to members we provide periodically to give an update on our progress towards delivering the plan that you would have agreed earlier in the year. There are a couple of formal things that I say at all of these meetings, and they're contained on page 40 of the agenda pack. Firstly, that we have continued to act with sufficient independence and objectivity and free from undue interference. Secondly, that we have not identified any instances where we feel that management have taken an inappropriate response to risk. And thirdly, that I am satisfied that we have sufficient capability and capacity of resources to complete the plan. This third one this year, though, as you will have seen from the report, is not the straightforward statement it is in a lot of years, but along with a number of other services, as all has mentioned, it's been quite the year. So I go through in a little bit more detail how I've come to that assessment about having sufficient resources, and in particular the level of support that we've been provided by the management team and the Mid-Kent Services Director to enable us to backfill, to take the place of members of my team who've been engaged in redeployment support, which has been a range of tasks across the council, most prominently assisting with the delivery of the administration of the business grants to businesses primarily in Maidstone, but we've also helped out at Tunbridge Wells and elsewhere. And as per the graph at the top of page 41, that is marginally up to the 1st December what we've done more than anything else up to that point. But we do say with that resource support, I'm satisfied that we've got sufficient capacity to continue to deliver the plan and to reach the end of the year and be able to produce a robust opinion. One thing that is particularly worth picking out that I thought would be some members' interest there is mentioned in paragraph 15, which some of that contractor support will come to us from overseas, from Lagos and Hyderabad, as it happens. We haven't offshored our work as we were in the vogue 10 years ago. What this is that contractors, UK employees of Mazars, our contract supplier, who for family reasons find themselves elsewhere in this period and are staying there for the time being and looking to continue their work with Mazars from their far-flung locations. What we've done is we've done some work with the data protection officers at Maidstone and the other authorities in the partnership. We also looked through the contract that we've got with Mazars for how data should be managed and how it should work. And we are satisfied that there are no increased material data protection risks from those officers working from those locations. They'll be keeping to UK hours as well while they're there. So it's a real test for remote working, but that's just to give members a bit more colour and flavour about the type of resource pressures and how we're dealing with them, to be able to have me tonight still make to you a statement about confidence in being able to complete the plan. Moving on the report, there was at the bottom of page 42, there was a very small amount of work outstanding from the previous year that didn't quite make the cut when we reported to members back in September. The only one of any substance there was on members' allowances, where we've got the summary at the bottom of page 42. Now, I appreciate that an audit on members' allowances will be of particular interest to this audience. And so I was going to go into a little bit of detail on this one, especially where we say that we found 3 errors. To be clear, in 2 of those cases, that was because members had claimed print cartridges. Print cartridges were not technically on the list of items that could be claimed for, but it was nevertheless common practice. And what's happened since is that the rules have been clarified and print cartridges are indeed a reclaimable expense. The other one was a claim which was for a train journey that hadn't had the receipt provided, or it had been misfiled. We were able to verify that the journey took place, and we were able to verify that the cost was in line with what the cost of the journey would actually be. But it was a question about filing and documentation. We agreed some actions with Democratic Services, one of which was to get in touch with members to remind them about the process, and I understand that has taken place. But elsewhere, these are things that will follow up as part of our current exercise. With respect to the 2021 plan, at the top of page 43, I've got a Gantt chart there of how the various components of that plan are in progress. We're expecting to start concluding some of those projects imminently, and certainly by the time we next report to you in March, a number of them will be finished, and we're looking to conclude all of them by the end of April. On follow-up of actions on page 44, again, we're happy with the progress that officers are making. There's a few outstanding, but none that I feel warrant bringing to your attention separately. Page 45 of the report, members will recall we had our own external quality assessment last year, which left us with a half dozen or so actions, and I just summarise our progress towards completing those. Many of them still complete, a few of them in progress as we work our way through the audit year. And I'll end my presentation, if I may, on page 46, where we talk of some of the success that we're always keen to highlight from within the team in gaining qualifications. Members will see the successes we've had there, but the one I particularly want to highlight is of Jen Warrilow, who's the Maidstone manager and here this evening, who has now completed her Chartered Internal Audit qualification, which has been an ambition of hers for many years. I'm very pleased that she's been able to do that with us, and so she now holds, this is the premier qualification in the internal audit world, and she is fully qualified now to do my job as head of audit, although not for a little while yet. Thank you very much, members. I'm happy to take any questions for you, Chair.
Thank you. And firstly, on behalf of the committee, congratulations to Jen. Well done on that qualification. In particular, thank you, Mr. Clark, for raising the impact of COVID-19 on your team and the bit about members' allowances. I think that was particularly helpful. So far, I've had just Councillor Atkinson request to speak, so over to you.
Comment, Chairman, please, when required, please.
Noted.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm glad Mr. Clark explained this use of overseas contractors, because until he did, I was a bit concerned, because we all know what can go wrong with that. So I wonder if it'd be helpful in future if maybe a fuller explanation could be put into the report, because on page 35 it says it will be completed by contractors based overseas. then a brief written explanation, such as Mr. Clark has just given, might actually be helpful, especially to the public at large, so there won't be concerns that we're exposed to dodgy dealings, as it were. So that's that point. Page 45, para 32, it says next spring. Now, I would imagine that possibly means this year. So does it mean spring 2021 or 2022? I'd imagine 21. It's not really clear. And finally, I'd like to add my congratulations to all the people who've been successful in their exams and gaining qualifications. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, you're right to respond to some of those points.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I take your point about the overseas working, Councillor Atkinson, and I think on reflection, it's perfectly valid to say that it warranted additional explanation, which I hope I've been able to provide for members this evening. However, I do expect this to be a one-off. Nevertheless, if we are ever in a position again where we're using overseas contractors, I'll take those points on board for drafting future reports. With respect to the question of next spring, it's part of our 21-22 audit plan, so it will be spring 2021. What you see is possibly an artefact of my having written this report before Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on my list, I've got Councillor Daley.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say two or three things. First of all, the paperwork which we've received currently to be able to undertake this meeting, Chairman, has been assembled under extremely difficult circumstances for all concerned. And I'm very, very appreciative of the fact that the members of the audit team, even though most of them will have been working from home, I'm sure, for the past umpteen months, has still been able to produce so much properly documented reporting in the way it has been done. So that, first of all, is a congratulation. Obviously, a congratulation for those who've passed exams too, because this is an ongoing chore, I think, isn't it, for officers in the audit or anything to do with accounts, that they're forever going in for examinations to increase and their ability and their capability within the job. Thank you for that. Then just one question, if I may, on top of that. It's been remarked about a print cartridge. I have to say that I don't mind preparing myself to buy equipment for use for the council. I don't need really much printing to be done on my own account, but I'm having to do more and more printing on behalf of the council for a variety of reasons. The print cartridge I've just bought, the cartridges, only two of them, £48. And I just wanted to make absolutely sure that this is an expense that I can claim for, because otherwise if it's to come out of my allowance, well, that's fair enough. But if that's going to be the case, then I think it would be nice to be told that. But in the past, I've never had this problem before, but it's coming out now that bit by bit we're having to go out and purchase our own equipment. Whereas before we just used to indent for it, and it came about. So if those could be dealt with, I'd be very grateful, please, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, are you able to respond to those points?
Firstly, thank you, Councillor Daley, for your kind words about our reporting. It's I don't want to gloss over that because those kind of kind words mean a lot. Especially, it's been difficult people working remotely for all year, so it's good to see the work recognised in that way. So thank you. Secondly, on the specific question of printer cartridges, my advice would be to get in touch with Democratic Services for the specifics of how and under what circumstances to claim, because that's not details that I have. What we found when doing the audit was that there was some uncertainty around it, and what you've said demonstrates that uncertainty still exists. I understood there'd been some clarification communications before Christmas on that, but if there are still questions on that, then they should be best referred to Democratic Services, who hopefully will be able to provide the answers you seek.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Next on my list to speak, I've got Councillor Cooling.
Thank you very much,
Rich, on page 44, in paragraph 25, there's a table, and what leaps out is that the high priority items there, particularly the actions carried forward at the 3rd of November, it seems to be a higher proportion than it started off at the beginning of the financial year. Is that a function of resources have been stressed, situation is difficult, etc., etc.? Is there anything we should worry about? Do you need any more support to knock those high priority ones on the head? Thank you.
Chair, if I may respond.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Cooling. No, if there were specific issues of concern among those high risk, those high priority actions, I would have drawn them out separately in the report or in the introduction. It is in their nature that high priority actions tend to be more complex, tend to be more long running, tend to be just thornier, knottier issues to crack, and so they'd have a tendency to take longer than you thought in a way that low priority actions don't have, if you get what I mean by that. However, they are also typically areas where the council has a degree of attention and focus as it progresses the action. And so typically what we find with high priority actions that go past their deadline is that there is progress being made, attention is still being devoted to the finding and to the issues that prompted the action to be raised in the first place, but we just haven't got to a point of being able to sign it off yet. If they were being completely ignored or they were falling seriously behind schedule, then absolutely you would see an accompanying narrative here, bringing that to your attention and, if necessary, stating my concerns with it. I haven't felt the need to be in that situation this evening.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, does anyone else wish to ask any questions? No? In which case we turn to page 34 of the agenda reports pack. There are two recommendations, both are for noting. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Happy to propose.
Chairman.
Perfect. I've got two proposals. Oh, perfect. Thank you. In that case, then, members, are you happy to agree that this report is noted?
Noted.
Agreed.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to take a brief pause here now. We'll take a 5-minute break. That will allow those that need to leave the meeting and the rest of you to, if you haven't already seen it, catch up on the urgent report that got sent around this evening. We'll then reconvene in 5 minutes' time. So we'll reconvene at 29. Oh, that's 10 minutes then. We'll make 5 minutes time, apologies. So that will then become 24 minutes past. you, members. I trust you're all back. We're going to do a quick attendance register to make sure you're all here. So over to Mrs. Snook.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll do the register again. Councillor Atkinson.
Present.
We have apologies from Councillor Brindle. Councillor Cox.
Here.
Councillor Cumming.
Present.
Councillor Daley.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Fissenden.
Here.
Councillor Harvey.
Present.
Councillor Perry.
Present.
Councillor Round.
Present.
Councillor Garton.
Yep, still there.
Thank you. Councillor Cooling.
Present.
And Councillor Titchener.
Present.
I take it all the officers are still here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I trust you all had a chance then to read that urgent item if you hadn't already seen it. We're picking up then on page 47 on agenda item 14, the Treasury Management and Investment and Capital Strategies. And I asked Mr. John Owen, Finance Manager, to introduce the report and the urgent update.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I just want to say thank you for everyone who was able to attend the member training on Treasury Management earlier with Richard Basson from Link. I know there's a lot to take in on it, but I hope you found some bits very useful, and hopefully you can sort of take it away and sort of think about it when you're sort of like looking at these strategies going forward and things. But and also, as I said before, I will be circulating slides to everyone that actually wants them. So that's fine. Yes, so the strategy, just to let you know, Prudential Code requires members to approve a Treasury Management strategy prior to the start of each financial year. This report actually focuses on the Treasury Management strategy for 2021-22, along with updated investment and capital strategies. As you know, Treasury Management is concerned with ensuring sufficient funds are available for authorities' day-to-day running. The investment strategy focuses on non-treasury investments like commercial property investment and loans to third parties, and the capital strategy looks at the risks and funding around the capital programme. The capital strategy is for next year. The Council is focusing on running cash balances down to a point which further borrowing will be required. Currently, there are £9 million worth of short-term borrowing with local authorities. The Council will be looking for a mixture of short and long-term borrowing going forward due to interest rates being so low, and also this spreads the risk of refinancing of debt going forward. Investment balance at the end of December was £24 million. A list of both investments and loans can be found in Appendix D for your information. The investment strategy, the Council has lent funds to Kent Savers and One Maidstone and Coventry Manor Estate so far. There's possibilities there may be further funding for Maidstone Property Holdings for refurbishing of property going forward. The investment strategy also shows the financial liability to Serco for the loan for the leisure centre. The Council doesn't have any properties that are deemed as commercial and therefore classified as general fund capital projects, so are not need to be noted within this strategy. The capital strategy details how the capital expenditure is financed and how it contributes towards the local services. The capital programme within the strategy is only a draft version, as it will be considered a P&R on the 20th of January on Wednesday. So therefore, may be subject to changes prior to being agreed by Council. Yeah, just on the urgent matter that came around, I hope everyone's had the chance to read it. I just want to sort of give you a brief overview what's actually happened there. What's happened is counterparty limits had unavoidably been breached last Friday, 15th of January 2021. This is due to the latest grant funding the Council received relating to COVID and business grants. 12.4 million was received on Friday. The council was only notified this on the Wednesday prior to this happening. As this was prior to a large number of payments which the council are due to be paid, all short-term accounts were currently full. As there's always a delay in receiving grant funding from the government and the checks the council has to go through to ensure that the eligible people have the right amount of funding, these funds need to be kept somewhere secure short term. We had a discussion within the team and it was decided to spread the funds across a number of instant access and short-term notice accounts, as this was deemed to be a lower option rather than leaving them in the council's current account. A list of the institutions where the funds were deposited are included within the report that's been circulated. We're expecting the limits will fall again over the next few weeks. As I said before, that we've got some large payments of business rates, precepts, etc. Around about the 15th, up to the 15th of February. But they may increase yet again as we will be getting housing benefits subsidy and some more Section 31 grant on this day. But then again, it depends how we pay out the grants to the individuals necessary, which may bring our balances down. With what's happened here, with this in mind, we're also looking at maybe increasing the counterparty limits in our instant access and short-term notice accounts, which I have detailed in my report, as there may be further funding with future lockdowns, etc., happening next year. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions from anyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, does anyone have anything they'd like to raise or any questions on that? I can see Councillor Cooling's typing. Do you want to jump straight in?
Chair, do you want comments on the urgent update or on the main paper? Is there any particular order you want?
No, whatever order suits you.
Well, as John has just commented on the urgent update, and I don't have any real problem, but I do wonder, using the word unavoidably, I do wonder whether that's appropriate. Because as I understand it, with the notification that money was coming in on Wednesday the 13th, it arrived on the 15th and it was dispersed so that it came back within limits by the 19th. That's, is it 4 days? Why did that have to be breached? So I haven't got a great issue, but why did it have to be breached? Couldn't there have been urgent disbursements of payments, early disbursements of payments? Or could not the money have gone on overnight rates? So I'm not clear that unavoidably is a fair word to leave in this report. That's my first comment. I don't know if you want to take that away.
Yeah, happy to do that first if you want. Mr. Owen, are you able to respond to that?
Mark, are you able to respond on my behalf, especially relating around the grant payments being paid out?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, happy to respond, Councillor Cooling, on that. I think what you're saying is, could we have taken action to forestall the breach? The amounts of money that we were talking about, I mean, 12 million of grant that came from the government is not the kind of money that you can just send out of the door at very short notice. And so it was more prudent to hold the money, albeit that it would mean extending, going over our limits with counterparties. Obviously, we are going to be using the money, as John explained, to pay grants to businesses over the next few days. So it really wouldn't have made sense to pay other suppliers in advance or anything like that in the way that I think you're suggesting. I mean, we didn't really have much alternative. I mean, on the question about whether we could put it on an overnight account, well, our day-to-day banking is handled by Lloyds Bank, and we would have just exceeded our limit with Lloyds if we had left it on the current account overnight. So we had to do something, and the approach that was taken of spreading the money around is a low risk one. And generally with risk, you attended the session before the meeting with Richard Basson, and I mean, he was saying that actually the counterparties that we have a very, very low risk with any of our lending. I think he used the words, we can all sleep easy at night. So although it's technically a breach, it's one that's associated with a very, very low risk.
If I may comment, Chair.
Yes, come back.
I totally agree, Mark. The risk, and I'm not worried about it. Who am I to be worried about it? It is very low risk. I was just slightly objecting to the word unavoidably. And I'm guessing this situation, given that we're into a very odd period and it may continue very odd for a good bit of this year, I'm wondering whether a similar circumstance might crop up in a few months' time, and therefore need to put in something that will not require a report next time that there was an unavoidable breach. So I would have thought there needs to be a contingency measure put in place for such an eventuality. Thank you.
Well, Chair, if I can just come back on Councillor Cooling's follow-up question. As John explained, in the Treasury Management Strategy, we are actually looking to increase our limits with counterparties. I mean, not to a ridiculous level, but it was in anticipation of a situation like that we, even before this eventuality arose, in drafting up the strategy, we knew we ought to have higher limits with counterparties. So that's how we're looking to address the situation in the future. It's not going to arise for a couple of months, I don't think, because what tends to happen towards the end of the financial year, given that most people pay council tax and business rates over the first 10 months of the year, February and March generally see money going out of our account. So in the ordinary course of events, balances would go down over the next few months.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cooling, do you want to come back on your other points to do with the rest of the report?
Well, I wonder whether other people would like to say something first, and then I would certainly like to come back. But I see. Do you want to, Chair, would you like to invite other people rather than me keep going on? Okay,
in which case then, Councillor Atkinson, you've also indicated to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I try not to carry on as well, but sometimes I feel the need to. On page 68, it says we've appointed Link Asset Services as our Treasury advisor. What's wrong with just reading the Financial Times? I wonder if Mr. Green could give us an expose, as it were, of exactly what services Link Asset Services do actually provide the council. That's the first point. Page 88, the US elections, that information is rather out of date now. On page 102, part of our lending policy mentions that we lend to employees. I mean, why would we lend to employees? And finally, on page 113, these three of the totals don't actually add up. I know it's due to rounding, but we've raised this issue in the past. So 4 points there. I hope you remember what they all were. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly happy to take those questions, Councillor Atkinson. First of all, with Link, well, you heard Richard Basson earlier, and he has a depth of knowledge about Treasury management that John and I can't really aspire to, and he also has access to experts who familiar with the whole field. So we find what he and his organisation bring to be really valuable. I mean, in the end, the decisions are made by Maidstone Borough Council, but Link provide a very useful sounding board and provide us with reassurance that we're on the right lines. And I wouldn't want to put forward a Treasury management strategy to the council without having taken that external professional advice that they can offer. So I'm very confident about saying that they provide value. Your next point, Councillor Atkinson, was about out-of-date information. I mean, the way it's presented, it does make clear that this is based on a report that was provided back in December. So I hope it's clear from the context that it's not meant to be information as of today. Your next point was about lending to employees. Could you give me a page number there, Councillor Atkinson?
Yes, it's on page 102, which is difficult to scroll through when you haven't got a paper copy, but which I haven't. But somewhere on page 102, it mentions that amongst various other people that we lend to includes employees.
Yes, I mean, the kind of situation where that might apply is if we're providing a loan for a car. I mean, for example, if a member of staff needs a car for their job, we might provide a loan. To tell the truth, the loans that we've given to employees like this over the past few years have been minimal because it's so easy for people to access finance from other sources. But we do just leave ourselves the option of being able to lend to staff in that kind of situation. But I mean, it would always be for a specific purpose like that, rather than just because somebody needed a bit of cash. Your final point on page 113. Yes, I apologise if there's rounding errors on that schedule. I mean, if you'd like to give us details, we'll check those and make sure that those are corrected.
Yeah, I mean, I can give them to you now, or I can email you at some stage.
I mean, maybe if you could email us, and yeah, thanks for picking those up.
Okay, I'll do that. Thanks very much. And the employees thing, that's actually quite a good little benefit if needed, isn't it? So I'm quite happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you. In which case then, Councillor Calling, back over to you. Councillor Calling, can you hear me?
I think we've lost Councillor Cooling.
I think we have.
He's just
frozen.
He's just frozen. He looks quite, sort of there. But, he's gone now.
Members, is there anyone else who wishes to ask a question or speak on this particular item?
I was merely going to suggest that I could propose the motion, the recommendation.
I think
he's unfrozen.
I believe you can hear me, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Councillor Calling, are you still there?
I think we've lost him again.
Councillor Cox, did you say you were happy to propose the item?
I was happy to propose it as on the papers, but do we not also have to include the urgent item with this?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Cox. If we could note the urgent item, that would be great.
Well, that as well then, Madam Chairman, and therefore we just seek a seconder unless it's yourself.
I will second from the chair. Perfect. So that's the three recommendations on the paper plus the fourth one, which is to note the urgent update. Members, are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. In that case, then we'll now turn to agenda item 15 on page 126. And this is the External Auditor's Annual Audit Letter. Before I ask the representatives of the External Auditor to present their reports, do any of the officers present wish to comment? No? In which case then, I'll ask the external auditors to present their report.
Thank you, Chair. So the two documents that are under this item are our annual audit letter and the updated audit findings report. The audit findings report is very similar to the one you would have seen in November. This has just been presented again to confirm that we did complete our audit work and the audit was signed by the deadline of end of November. Other than that, it is largely the same as you would have seen before. The only point I would draw your attention to in the audit findings report is on page... sorry, I've lost the page number now I wanted to tell you. On page 153 of your packs, where we've added some additional detail in relation to the evaluation of pension fund net liability in response to some questions raised at the last committee meeting. I'm happy to take any questions on these two documents.
Thank you. Members, will start with the first report, which is the annual audit letter, and then we'll move on to the progress report and sector updates later on. Members, were there any comments on the annual audit letter?
Madam Chairman, can I ask a question on page 153?
Certainly.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, my question, as I said, on page 153, the significant audit risk of the pension fund net liability, which has just been referred to. There are indeed some answers, to the points that were raised last time, but as they're just a commentary, as I can see, and I have no doubt that the investigation has been completely thorough, but my feeling is, and I think it's important, in the interest of due diligence at a time of financial and economic volatility, that the members of this committee see what exactly was the explanation received by the auditors on evaluation, on procedure, comments and risk assessment, because the members might reach a different conclusion from the auditors, because they may think, and I'm just sort of guessing here, but the members of this committee might think that a different investment and monitoring strategy is necessary. And what concerns me is, in this current economic climate, that if the pension fund suffers in any way, that Maidstone needs to prove that it's done the best due diligence it can. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for that. Mr. Green, are you able to respond to that?
Yes, unless Tina wanted to say anything first of all, as it's basically on the audit report.
Just to say that we have just provided a summary there with some more detail about the work that we perform on the report that comes from the actuary, which will of course have been through Mark Green's team prior to coming to us and inclusion in the financial statements. If there are specific questions, then I'm happy to either take those in the meeting or outside of it, if that's something you'd want to consider. Other than that, I suppose it's down to Mark Green to say perhaps his comments.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tina. Yeah, I mean, that, as you've said, the role of the auditors is to look at the actuary's report, and it's not actually to comment on the investment strategy of the pension fund. And whilst you're right, Councillor Titchener, it's absolutely right that we make sure that the fund manages the council's pension assets appropriately. The prime responsibility for that lies with the Kent Pension Fund. We're just one member amongst a whole lot of other public authorities, and the mechanism for holding them to account and making sure they're following an appropriate investment strategy is mainly with the KCC Superannuation Committee. I mean, it's not really within the remit of this committee, and the Superannuation Committee comprises Kent County Councillors. There's also a representative of the district councils, that are all members of the pension fund, but they're the people who we rely on to monitor the overall performance of the pension fund. I mean, it's not something that really falls within the remit of this committee or the auditors as part of their work.
Yeah,
I hope that helps.
can I add a point there, Madam Chairman? I mean, we are in extraordinary times at the moment, and I fully understand, you know, I think as Mark has just said, the auditors have a different focus on doing this. When it comes to investment strategy and so on, this is out of not in their remit, really. That's up to the members and Maidstone Borough Council. But we have this actuarial valuation every 3 years, and I think we just need to look at it much more closely and in much greater detail, and to question and ask what the actuaries are doing, and looking at the investment funds. This is a very important sort of risk liability, and it's not a steady state, and I think we need to be quite clear what the auditors have actually received in answers to their questions, so that we can actually say hand on heart that we've done our best to make sure that this pension fund is being properly managed and looked after.
Chairman, can I interrupt just a second, just to explain that that is my personal situation, is that I am a member of the superannuation fund on the Kent County Council. So I'm aware entirely of the investment strategy and the amount of auditing and probing that goes on relative to the placement of funds, and also to see its incremental increase in the total overall value of that fund, which today stands at several £billion.
Thank you, Councillor Daley. Chair, can I just come back on Councillor Titchener's points?
Certainly.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps if I could make a suggestion, Councillor Titchener. I mean, it's absolutely right that members should have an understanding of what's in the actuary's report, and I'd suggest that probably the time to do it is when this committee looks at the council's annual accounts, because then you see the results of the pension fund and you see the actuary's report, and so that's the time that all of this information is in front of you. I mean, I know it goes along with a whole lot of other information that's in our statement of accounts, so it's quite a lengthy document, but that might be the time to look at it. And I mean, last year it was July that came to the AGS committee, although we'd done a presentation for members informally in June. So perhaps if we could pick the issue up then, would that help?
Yes, I think it would, Mark. I mean, I'm not criticising the auditors at all, and I'm not criticising the pension fund. I'm just saying in these difficult times, a new look might be a good idea, even if it agrees that nothing should be done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, you've indicated a wish to speak. Was it on this particular discussion item?
Yes, it was. I was really just wishing to add a comment. I have no background in pensions, so I think if I was asked to look at this, I would have to be referring to the document itself, where I read assessment of information, reasonableness, adequacy of funds. I think it would be very hard for this committee to necessarily say that we found something that the people who we are paying, which is rather pertinent, have come up with a different judgment. I can see where Peter is going and honour his querying, but I personally would find it very difficult to see if there are loopholes that's been missed. And I think pensions are so long term that, yes, we're in very strange times. But if you look at the documents we were looking at earlier in the earlier briefing, where you looked at the percentage of return you were getting in 2005 compared to now, and that you see that it's vastly different at what the interest rate was. And so therefore this will all, as they say, come out in the wash. I hope we aren't going to be looking at some big companies that have incorrectly invested their pension funds and used them. That isn't there. That isn't visible. So, and that isn't happening. So I really feel that I think it's quite a specialist thing we're questioning, unless Peter has a different view.
No, thank you, Martin. No, I mean, I'm not sort of saying that we're doing the wrong thing. It's just one of the auditor's answers was, for example, when the question was, test the consistency of the pension fund assets and liability and disclosures in the notes to the core financial statements for the actuarial report from the actuary. The answer was, we compared the final actuary's report to the disclosures in the council's financial statements. I mean, that's fine, but it'd be interesting, I think, for the committee to know exactly what the conclusion was, having compared. That's a statement. There's nothing wrong with a statement. It's just the detail of the figures and the risk assessment and the comments are not obvious.
I should think the pension industry itself is worried as to how on earth, with rates at almost zero, that they are going to defend these 2.35 pension rates and things like that. But that's not for us to worry about, Peter, is it? There we go. Thank you very much for your comments. Always valued.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it to your attention, basically. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garton, I can see you also wish to speak. Is it on this particular point or is it something different?
Just on the conversation just being had, I mean, the leader of the council says, well, I don't really understand this, and he can't really much comment on it. Yes, I mean, what the purpose of this committee of elected representatives is, and that's where Councillor Cooling is perfectly right to query it, is we are laymen in this thing, but it is for us to question whether there is any reasonable doubt for us or any reasonable concern for us. I think that is the purpose of this committee, and we would fail our electorate if we don't do that. So therefore, I'm very grateful for Councillor Cooling raising those concerns, and I listen to it with interest.
Peter Tishner
echoed my comment
on this, not me.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Councillor.
Don't blame me for everything, please, Patrick.
No. Yeah. Sorry for Peter, Councillor Tishner.
Councillor Perry, you've also indicated to speak. Is it on this particular point?
Yes, it is actually. I agree with Councillor Cox, actually, what he said, and I understand where everybody's coming from, but this is a hugely specialist area, and quite frankly, if we wanted to challenge what would be actuarial information, I think we'd have to employ another set of actuaries. Yeah. I have been in that position myself, where I worked for an organisation and they disagreed, and they employed their own set of actuaries to have pistols at dawn with the other set of actuaries. It doesn't necessarily get you anywhere. I think there are a lot of safeguards already in this. I mean, I think Councillor Daley pointed out where KCC are, and obviously they put a lot of effort into monitoring this. We have our own external auditors who are doing the same thing, and that's what this is all about. It's about monitoring the internal controls. And quite frankly, I'm not sure what we could do. We could have a great big report, but as Councillor Cox quite rightly said, we're not experts in this area. You require actuarial experts to get behind this, and they are very, very specialist, highly qualified. And I've got one or two friends who are actuaries, and I know how difficult their exams are. So they are very, very specialist. And I think we've got a lot of internal controls already in this system. And we don't want to go about reinventing the wheel, quite frankly. So that's where I'm coming from. And I agree with Councillor Cox. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Councillor Cooling, do you want to come in on this particular item?
I will, and then I've got a separate item. But on this, and after 7 years of actuarial training, and I'm not an actuary, John, it's remarkable how in previous experiences I've been able to push the actuarial valuations of pension funds quite a distance to complete a negotiation. So there's a lot of science, a lot of maths, a lot of science, but a lot of art in it. And so I think I'm with my with Peter Tishner on this, who's guilty on this subject, not me, that we ought to look at it. And sometimes it's the stupid questions that actually get some point and some point of traction. So I'm with Peter T on this, and I volunteer to read 100, 200 pages, whatever it's going to be. But I do have a separate point when you're ready.
Thank you. Members, before we move on, does anyone else want to cover anything on this discussion around actuaries we've just been having? No?
The only thing, Madam Chairman, it's been me again. I heard what John Perry was saying. Yes, I understand that, you know, we're not necessarily all experts on this, but as the liability is 70 million or so, I think it's an important situation that just needs to be looked at a bit more closely.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to move away from actuaries now, and I believe that Councillor Atkinson has got a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm glad we've moved away from pensions. I don't understand it either. But anyway, moving on. Page 128, at the very bottom, it says they're asking for a further increase of 15% in their fees. And on page 181, the auditors are saying Teams or phone is more time consuming. Well, it might well be, but it's less time consuming because they're not actually having to drive anywhere. So I'd like to know how they can justify the request for 15% increase. And then a very minor thing, most of the typos have been corrected, but on our page 169, Brunswick should read Brunswick Street. Well, justification of the increase in fees, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina, are you able to answer that one for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So what we have found across the board in our audits this year is the additional time that it takes to conduct an audit remotely, and that is through not being in the same building and room as someone does actually add more time, whereas, you know, if you're face to face and you're having conversations, things can be dealt with quite quickly. We found that arranging additional meetings, having to do everything electronically, sharing screens, etc., does add on time to resolving queries, raising queries, and just the day-to-day management of the audit. And that it also requires additional work because we're having to see things electronically, which previously we would have perhaps been in the room looking at particular files, and all of that sort of adds up over the course of the audit period. And we found this across the board, and therefore the percentage that you're talking about, is not specific to the Maidstone experience. It's something that we're seeing across the board with all of our audits.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson, do you want to come back?
No, not really. I mean, you know, that's subject to agreements with the PSAA anyway, isn't it? But it's good to have an explanation. Thank you.
Councillor Cox, you just asked to comment. Is it on this particular?
Yes, it is. I'd have put questions. Sorry, so different semantics. I just wonder. I believe we approach the charge of getting the auditors in as a whole county, and I believe so. Is Tina saying that everybody across the county has negotiated this amount of a rise, or you're just bringing it to each district council in turn and seeing which ones say, well, that's a heck of a hike, and is that only for 1 year, and therefore once we're all vaccinated we go back to normal and you would take a cut back down? Any comment on that, please?
So the approach has been to discuss this with the PSAA, and then we are discussing it individually with councils because it is an individual council fee. I'm not privy to the central negotiations that are going on with PSAA, but it is an ongoing discussion with them in relation to this fee level. And we will take any feedback, and I'm sure the PSAA will take any feedback from yourselves in relation to it. With regards future fees, we will be discussing that with management and then with yourselves when we get into our audit planning for 2021. Obviously, there will be the impact of COVID on 2021, although we hope that it wouldn't be for the whole audit period as it was this year. And then from there, we will just have to see how things progress. But hopefully this wouldn't be something that would be there for forever, because this is specifically related to the COVID-19 additional costs.
So just to make that clear then, on page 171, that's where you're showing the COVID-19 related additional fee at £6,950.
Yes, so that's the additional fee on top of what we'd already agreed. So that is specifically related to the costs we found this year. But like I say, we will be discussing the fee for 2021 as part of our planning, which will be starting fairly soon.
Right. Okay, so if notes are being taken from our comments, then I would encourage others to comment, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Calling, do you want to come in on this particular point as well?
No, there's a detailed separate point, but I'll be patient for you to finish this point.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to come in on this particular point as well whilst we're on it? No? Tina, can I just check, did you take away Councillor Atkinson's note about adding in street into your report?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
In which case then, Councillor Calling, over to you.
Yeah, very detailed one. Page 167, we've seen it before, but this is about declarations of interest. This is now out of date. It seems that last July there were 17 still outstanding, even though they were requested beginning of April. And the process for managing the distribution and collection was going to be looked at. Is there anyone on the call who can reassure us that all members have now provided declarations of interest and that the process has been tightened up? Thank you.
Councillor Cooling, I'm not aware of the current situation. I don't know if Ellie Dunnett will be able to say, but if neither of us have the information at our fingertips, then we can come back to you outside of the meeting and let you know the current status. But I would assure you that we do work hard, and we will try again next year to get this information from members.
Mark, no need to come back. You've got enough to do. Thanks for being on the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, sorry, Ellie, did I interrupt you there?
No, it was me. It was Tina. I was just going to say that we will follow up on this recommendation when we do our reporting for next year. We do follow up on the prior year recommendations.
Thank you. Members, does anyone else have any questions on this particular item? No, in which case then we turn to page 126. And there are two recommendations. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Proposed and noted, Chairman.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you. Members, are both those recommendations agreed?
Noted.
Agreed.
Perfect.
Agree.
Moving on then to agenda item 16. This is on page 173 of the reports pack. This is again an external audit report, and I'll ask Tina to please introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. This is just an update on progress. Obviously, we haven't started the 2021 audit work yet. We will be in contact with the finance team to start that soon. Other areas we're currently working on, just the certification of the housing benefit claim, which we will report on at the next committee meeting. And the other areas to note from this report are just in the sector update pages from 183 onwards. The changes to the code of practice, and the most significant of which is the change in the way we will be reporting on our value for money work, which will change from being part of the audit findings report to having its own separate report. And there have been some changes in the criteria, which you can see there on page 188. The second part, just to note, is from page 193 onwards, where we just talk about some revisions to accounting standards, which means we will be doing additional work in relation to accounting estimates. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members, does anyone wish to have any questions on this?
I was dying there for, Madam Chairman, for Peter Cooling to say he wanted to, and I could have said, and now for something completely different, as is in the papers on 189, but I can't do that, so sorry to interrupt.
Do you really wish to give me the excuse? No, I've got nothing to say, believe it or not.
In which case, then, members, we will return to page 173. There is one recommendation here, and that is that the item is noted. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Propose it noted, Chairman.
Seconded.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Members, is this report noted?
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you, everyone. Turning then to the final item, which is agenda item 17, the Budget Strategy Risk Assessment Update. This report is from Mr. Green, so I'll ask Mr. Green to introduce.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. This is the usual report that I bring to each meeting of the committee with an update to our assessment of the budget risks. And there's just a few things I'd like to highlight. First of all, so far as the budget for next year is concerned, since we last reported, there's a slight improvement in that the projected budget gap has reduced following the Chancellor's spending review and the local government finance settlement just before Christmas. The settlement was slightly more generous than we'd expected, but we do still face a significant budget gap next year, and there are reports going to the service committees this month that show how we're proposing to address that. Another aspect of the budget is the capital programme, and as was mentioned in the presentation before the meeting, there's some positive news there, which means that it's going to be easier to fund the capital programme because borrowing rates from the PWLB came down at the end of last year by 1%. So that's reduced the risk around funding the capital programme. And the external factors that are highlighted in the report, well, first of all, in our last report, it was mentioned about the risks associated with the second wave of COVID-19, and sadly, of course, that's really materialised with the third lockdown and the likely impact of that on the economy. The area where risk has probably reduced a bit is around Brexit. We haven't removed that risk altogether, but with the trade deal with the EU, some of the risk of a disorderly Brexit has gone away, although there's still the potential for disruption on the Kent road network. And of course, it's still too early to say what the overall impact of Brexit will be. So to sum up, on page 201, you can see the changes that I'm suggesting to the budget risk register. Both improvements. One is a reduced risk around funding the capital programme, and the other is a reduced risk around Brexit. And as usual, the report summarises the risks in the appendix and has a rough and ready financial quantification of the risks on page 205 of the papers. So I'll leave it at that, but obviously happy to take any questions or comments that members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Members, has anyone got any questions? Straight over to you, Councillor Cox.
Yes, Mr. Green, just to sort of say, we've said that there was the fears that we had from Brexit about disruption to our services. And I think before Christmas, we really saw what the potential disruption could be, and may even be when all the slowing of cargo and transportation of cargo through the M2 and M20. And that's really going to kick in, I believe. We're reported through Kent leaders that it'll really start in July. So I think we'll a bit like we've had the second and third wave. I think the tentative knee knocking will come at July. I did read Councillor Daley's comments, who was saying it's not a happy new year. I feel we have had a reasonable start to the new year, obviously with the vaccine rollout, and I hope that that proceeds as well as we can expect. but I do feel that the crunch is going to come for Brexit arrangements, and plenty though they are that have been put in place, that really July, when we actually move towards customs and all that comes there, that will be our telling time. Once we get, I believe, past August, September, if it's all running smooth as clockwork, I think we'll be able to look at this risk register with those implementation of those things you put on there in a different light. But until then, I think we should hold them still slightly on a pedestal in the risk register as you have done. But thank you very much for your report, and certainly from my standpoint, thank you for highlighting what you have and keeping us on the course that you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Calling, you've also indicated a wish to speak.
It's only a comment. The matrix is Appendix A is headed Budget Strategy Risks. I'm guessing, Mark, this is not tied to any particular budget year. It's more a view of shorter term financial pressures. I mean, so I am being pedantic, but it is not with reference to the current or the next financial year. It's the world as we see it in the shorter term at the moment. Is that fair?
That's correct. Yes, Councillor.
Good.
Comment, Chairman, if I may.
Certainly.
Thank you, Chairman. My prognostications of doom are only based on my remembrances of how once one disrupts the distribution system, which is in place for almost everything we use on a daily basis, the outcome of that is usually a price increase. When vehicles are delayed anywhere, somebody pays for that delay. It's called demurrage in the trade. And when those costs of delay are added to the costs of the goods on the shelf, that inevitably ends up with price increases, which turn into inflation. And I'm still of the opinion that we are underestimating the way in which inflation will be affected during the coming 18 to 24 months. And I know that we've got some forecasts going through sort of 2 to 3%. I'm of the opinion that is too low, but I think it's all going to come out in the wash one way or the other. And I think that Councillor Cox is right. I think July is a date which I think we should bear in mind as possibly a tipping point. But I do think that costs are going to go up, prices are going to go up, and inflation is going to increase. I think that's an inevitability. I may be wrong. I hope I am. But just keep an eye on the inflation rate, and therefore our future investment percentages, or those things which are going to cost us either to borrow money or to use money. I don't think 2 to 3% is going to be enough. There you are. But I think that is something that maybe we must keep our eye on now, because we're there. Brexit's happened. The break has happened. We're no longer members of the EU. Neither are we of the customs union, and that is the more important bit. So there we are. So be very careful how we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to this?
Please.
Go for it.
I'm in the unusual but fortunate position of being able to totally agree with what Dan has just said. I'm not an economist, but I do personally believe that Dan is absolutely right, that we're in for a period of higher inflation. And that is where in the risk register, on the matrix, and in terms of getting capital in now with lower interest rates, I do think there is an opportunity or the need for the borough to actually have a degree of rethink in terms of its financial risk and in terms of financing its capital programme. I do agree with Councillor Daley. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, does anyone else wish to say anything? In which case we turn to page 196 of the agenda reports pack. There is one recommendation here that the report be noted. Have I got a proposer and a seconder, please?
I'm happy to propose that, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Second.
Perfect. Thank you. Members, is this report noted?
Noted.
Thank you. Members, that is the full agenda now completed. Thank you for your time this evening. I would wish you a safe journey home, but you're probably already there, so have a lovely rest of the evening. And I now declare the meeting closed.
Thank you, Madam Chair.